Oh, hi there. Welcome to the Freedom Alternative. It's getting increasingly hard for me not to see parallels between the militant LGBT-ists and organized fundamentalist religion. The LGBT lobby acts these days more and more like a totalitarian lynch mob than like a civil rights lobby as they purport. I also think that there should be a clear line between LGBTists and non-straight people. Most non-straight people are not LGBTists, and not all LGBTists are non-straight. Just like in the case of feminism, most women are not feminists, and not all feminists are women. LGBTism is essentially an ideology, a collectivist totalitarian ideology, if you pardon my pleonasm, which seeks to enforce its will upon everyone else whether they like it or not. And when they'll have all the equality and fairness that the populace can stomach, and then some, they'll demand some more, for the sake of community cohesion, of course. Let me give you some examples. A few years ago, Elton John made international headlines when he said that Jesus Christ was a homosexual. As an atheist, I don't really care about his arguments, and I support Elton John's rights to speak his mind, regardless of my opinion, just like I also insist upon my right to speak my mind, regardless of anyone else's opinion. Sure, a few people took offense with Elton John's comments, as it was expected, but no lynch mob tried to get him to lose business, and generally no repercussions were cast upon Elton John for his comments. And that is something that I find fundamentally great. On the other hand, Brendan Eich, one of the founders of Mozilla Corporation and the inventor of JavaScript, without which your internet experience today would be significantly poorer, was forced to resign from his CEO position when it emerged that he donated $1,000 to the yes side of Prop 8 in 2008. For those of you who don't know, Prop 8 was a referendum in California regarding gay marriage, and the yes side was the one supporting traditional marriage, whilst the no side supported gay marriage. It didn't matter that even the high-level leftist figures such as Hillary Clinton and Hussein Obama were also supporting the same position at the time. When it emerged that Brendan Eich dared to be against the so-called progressive consensus, he was swept away in a heartbeat. More recently, when Bruce Jenner decided suddenly that he's not a he, we all got the chance to see more of the LGBTism authoritarian style of thinking. Brendan O'Neill from The Spectator says it better than me, so I'm gonna quote him. So when Drake Bell, a former American child star, tweeted, "Sorry, still calling you Bruce," he became the subject of global fury. The cult of Caitlyn went insane. Even after Bell deleted his blasphemous comment, tweeters mauled him, suggesting he deactivates his Twitter account, or better still, deactivate his life. Meanwhile, a Twitter robot called @SheNotHe has been set up to correct any misgendering of Caitlyn. Winning high praise from much of the media, this bot is scrubbing Twitter looking for anyone who uses the he pronoun in conjunction with Caitlyn Jenner's name. The bot's inventor says he is delighted that these misgendering miscreants have been apologetic in their replies to the bot, and some have even deleted their original tweet. In short, they've repented. Just as those who denied the divinity of Christ were once expected to recant their heresy, so those who denied the gender of Caitlyn Jenner are now hounded by bots into apologizing for their moral error. The American gay rights group GLAAD is scoring the mainstream media for any use of the word he in relation to Caitlyn, like a modern incarnation of the Vatican's Index Librorum Prohibitorum, which monitored the public sphere for any less than gushing commentary on God. It has issued speech policing guidelines for the media. Don't refer to her by her former name. Do avoid using male pronouns on Caitlyn's prior name, even when referring to events in her past. Really, I would recommend reading that entire article, link in the low bar, because it's a very frank analysis on the T part of the LGBTist politics. But no religion is strong enough if it doesn't get state funding. And here, in secular post-Christian progressive Europe, funding for LGBTism is not scarce at all. Powerful lobbies, which are supposedly non-governmental, get up to 80% of their funding directly from the taxpayers' pockets. The International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual and Trans Association branch in Europe, called ILGA Europe, gets 75% of its funding directly from the EU. And when members of the European Parliament dared to question that, as Godfrey Bloom from Britain and Konrad Szymanski from Poland made inquiries to the Commission about this state of affairs, the Commission weaseled out from the question, and virtually all LGBT-ist organizations in Europe encouraged their followers to hurl abuse at the two MEPs. Because, you see, under LGBTism, questioning whether it's appropriate for an organization to call itself an NGO whilst receiving most of its money from taxpayers is homophobia, incendiary, and right-wing. Also, notice that right-wing is somehow bad or something, but of course never left-wing. That's how we roll here in European Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The Politburo, the European Commission dictates, and we're all supposed to just roll over and pretend nothing wrong is happening. There's also some separation between the state and the LGBT-ist religion. Commissioner Viviane Reding went public in 2012 saying that we only fund the gay lobby, but we also have no control over its activities. Well, that's very interesting, isn't it? When such a state of affairs occurs in the case of a religion, usually Christianity, because financing Islam is also A-OK in progressive Europe, militant atheists are in quite a hurry to call this a theocracy, and secularists aren't too far behind in getting their knickers unceremoniously in a twist. But when an identical state of affairs occurs with other ideologues, such as feminism, LGBTism, eco-Marxism, and a few others, somehow the staunch supporters of separation between militant irrational ideologies and the state are just nowhere to be found. But it goes even beyond EU funding for organizations. The EU also funds phony LGBT victimization surveys, which are so well done that can easily be cooked by someone with enough patience, an internet connection, and a willingness to clean browser cookies. The EU Fundamental Rights Agency spent 370,000 euros on such a survey in 2012, which was as representative for the non-straight experience as a poll made on 4chan. The survey was totally anonymous, which means one person could answer the same questionnaire 20 times. It excluded not just most of the population, but most of the non-straight population as well, and had suggestive questions as opposed to open questions. The results of the survey were then used to campaign for even more funding for the LGBTist lobby because, you know, our little internet poll proved that we're necessary. The whole thing is just a scam. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. The government of Netherlands has a special fund reserved for LGBTist groups, and similar scams exist in Sweden and Belgium. The most conservative estimate that I can give is that at least €500 million are being funneled across Europe annually from taxpayers to LGBTist groups via massive bureaucratic apparatus of Europe, which, by the way, it is now larger than communist China's. And of course you may wonder, what do these LGBTist groups do? Do they spend the funds to go rescue non-straights facing the risk of being, I don't know, thrown out of a building in Syria? Or do they spend the funds to improve the legislation in Uganda to spare some executions of non-straight people for their crime of being non-straight? No, that would be real work. No, what they do is police the language of people like me and shout at the peoples of Europe about how bigoted and intolerant they are, and make sure everyone is correct in their speech and nobody misgenders someone else in the media. In their spare time, they also deal with other important issues, such as lobbying to make abortion a human right. That is to say, something that we, the taxpayers, must pay whether we like it or not. The progressive definition of human right, as with all the progressive definitions in general, has been twisted beyond recognition. In Italy, the LGBTists are busy to change everyone's birth certificates to no longer say madre and padre, but genitore uno and genitore due. That is, parent 1 and parent 2, because non-straight parents are offended. Seriously, and if you dare to question it, you guessed it, you're a homophobe. Apparently, everyone is supposed to be okay with being stripped of their identity of mother and father for the sake of the feelings of 10% of the non-straight population who wants to be a parent. Because let's be clear on this. Most non-straights don't want to get married and don't want to have children. So for the sake of a tiny minority of a minority, now everyone is parent 1 and parent 2. Or else. If that's not fundamentalist religious bigotry, I don't know what is. And because LGBTism is an ideology and not a civil rights lobby, the entire discourse has been divorced from reality. Any disagreement, no matter how mild, with the LGBT-ist agenda is now some sort of phobia. And if the disagreement happens to come from a non-straight person, then that person has, you guessed it, internalized homophobia. The reality is that the number of genuine homophobes is minuscule. If there was a homophobe behind every bush, as LGBTists would have us believe, then there would be a non-straight being assaulted or murdered because of being non-straight at least once a week somewhere in Europe. But since that's not happening, LGBTists have invented hate crimes, amongst which count things like questioning the legitimacy of gay marriage. Here's a hate crime that I commit every time the topic emerges. I say usually, look, if you're after the tax benefits and whatnot, then why not get a civil partnership, like in France, or until recently like in Britain? This way nobody is offended and you get what you want. The answer to that is usually, oh, but you know, it's about the love. Well, okay, then if it's about the love, then why go after marriage to begin with? Most young straight couples today avoid marriage like plague, and for bloody good reason, because the state has made it a severely insane proposition, particularly for men. What I just said now is a hate crime in some portions of Europe. When you have to resort to outright banning opposite points of view, that's when I'll suspect dealing with a power-grabbing totalitarian agenda and not with people genuinely concerned about civil rights. I also outright refuse the idea that LGBTists are liberals. No, they're not. Liberals tend to live and let live. LGBTists tend to regulate and meddle and interfere just like any other progressives. Liberals tend to see the value in free exchange of ideas and other points of view, including and especially when they disagree. To LGBTists, there is no other point of view. If you disagree with LGBTism, you must be far right, and if you take a dim view of LGBTist actions, you must be a homophobe. End of story. Now, a truly liberal trade-off for all of this debacle would be to insert a total privatization of marriage, just like the state of US state of Alabama have done. Get the state out of the marriage business. And I say trade-off because there are no solutions, but merely trade-offs. There was a time when liberals were about getting the government out of our bedrooms. They seem nowhere to be found these days, as most of them have morphed into creep-giving progressives who regard themselves as the sole arbiters of the truth. But for as long as we can't even discuss the issue outside of the progressive straitjacket, pun intended, there's no way societies can reach a decent trade-off by themselves. And top-down, command-and-control, unconstitutional decisions like we've recently seen in the United States of America aren't helping either. On the contrary, they'll make things even worse. A day will come when the progressives will reap what they have sown, which is nothing but division, polarization, resentment, and relativism. I can only hope that the whole politically correct edifice will crumble before such day is needed, because if such day were to come, it's not going to be pretty. The discussion is even longer than that, but I'll stop here. And with that being said, don't forget to click the subscribe button and consider supporting this channel. Thanks for watching.